Most people see the leather jacket and cross the street. They see the patches, the beard, the scars, and they make their assumptions. But there's something about the biker world that outsiders never understand. A code that runs deeper than any law written in courtrooms. And on a cold October night in rural Montana, a terrified waitress was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous-looking people are exactly who you want on your side. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her name was Jenny McKenzie, 19 years old, working the graveyard shift at Murphy's truck stop on Highway 2. The kind of place where coffee flows like water and the neon, open 24 hours sign has been flickering the same way since 1994. Jenny had been seeing the red Chevy pickup for 3 weeks now. Always the same time, between 2 and 4 a.m. when the place was nearly empty. The driver would sit in the parking lot, engine running, headlights off, just watching her move from table to table through the windows. She called the sheriff twice. Both times, Deputy Collins drove out, looked around, saw nothing. Probably just some trucker taking a break. He'd said, nothing illegal about parking in a public lot. But Jenny knew the difference between a tired driver and a predator. And the man in the red truck? He was hunting. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know, have you ever felt like someone was watching you? That cold feeling on the back of your neck when you know you're being hunted? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. This story happened in small-town Montana, but predators exist everywhere. And sometimes, the only thing standing between evil and innocence is someone willing to stand up. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because this channel is dedicated to stories that matter. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the system fails, and good people refuse to look the other way. The biker's name was Marcus "Tank" Sullivan, though most people just called him Tank. 45 years old, with gray threading through his black beard and hands that looked like they'd been through wars, which they had. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Then 15 years wearing the patch of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. Not the kind of club that made headlines for all the wrong reasons. These were different men, bound by a code that said strength existed to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Tank had stopped at Murphy's truck stop because his Harley was running hot and he needed coffee. Simple as that. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of hour when the world belongs to insomniacs and third-shift workers. He'd chosen booth 7 in the back corner, the one with a clear view of the entrance and the parking lot. Old habits from the military. Never sit with your back to danger. That's when he first saw Jenny McKenzie, and something about her caught his attention immediately. Not in the way most men notice pretty waitresses. Tank was too old and too weathered for that kind of foolishness. No, what caught his attention was the way she moved, quick, nervous glances toward the windows every few seconds, like she expected something bad to come through that glass. Jenny was small, maybe 5'4", with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes that looked older than her 19 years. She'd been working at Murphy's for 8 months, saving money for college, dreaming of getting out of Millerville, Montana, population 1,847. The truck stop job paid better than anything else in town, especially the graveyard shift differential. But lately, those extra dollars felt like blood money. She approached Tank's table with a coffee pot, her smile practiced but not reaching her eyes. Coffee? Black? Tank replied, watching. Her pour with hands that shook almost imperceptibly. You okay, miss? He asked quietly. Jenny's eyes darted to his face, then away. She wasn't used to customers asking about her well-being. Most people looked right through service workers like they were furniture. Fine, she said automatically. Just tired. But Tank had been reading people for too long to miss the signs. Fear. Exhaustion deeper than any shift work could explain. The kind of bone-deep weariness that came from sleeping with one eye open. Anything else? Jenny asked, stepping back from the table. Tank studied her face for a moment longer. No, ma'am. Take care of yourself. She nodded and walked away. But Tank noticed she made another nervous glance toward the windows. He followed her gaze and saw it. A red Chevy pickup sitting at the edge of the parking lot, headlights off but engine running. Steam rose from the exhaust in the cold October air. Tank had seen enough ambushes to recognize one being set up. What Tank didn't know yet was that Jenny's nightmare had started 3 weeks ago with something that seemed almost innocent. A man had come into the truck stop around 3 a.m., ordered coffee and a burger, sat quietly in booth 4 for about an hour. He was probably in his mid-30s, average height and build, the kind of forgettable face that blended into crowds. He'd left a decent tip, and Jenny hadn't thought about him again, until he came back the next night. Same time, same order, same booth. But this time, he watched her. Not obviously. He wasn't crude or aggressive. He just paid attention. When she refilled his coffee, when she cleared other tables, when she laughed at something Pete the cook said from the kitchen. His eyes followed her movements with the intensity of someone studying for a test. The third night, he didn't come inside at all. Jenny spotted the red Chevy in the parking lot around 2:30 a.m., just sitting there. When she mentioned it to Pete, he shrugged. Lot of truckers take power naps. Don't worry about it. But truckers didn't take 3-hour power naps in the same spot every night. And they didn't position their vehicles for maximum visibility into the restaurant windows. By the end of the first week, Jenny's sleep schedule was destroyed. She'd get home at 7 a.m., exhausted from her shift, but every sound outside her apartment would jolt her awake. Was that his red truck in the parking lot below? Was he watching her bedroom window? She started keeping the blinds closed even during the day. The second week, he escalated. The red truck began following her home, staying far enough back to maintain plausible deniability, but close enough that she knew. He'd park across the street from her apartment building and sit there until she turned off her lights. Then he'd drive away, only to return to the truck stop the next night. Jenny called the sheriff's department. Deputy Collins was a good man, but he was also practical to a fault. Has he threatened you? No. Has he tried to approach you? No. Has he done anything other than sit in a public parking lot? Well, no. Miss McKenzie, I understand you're concerned, but the man isn't breaking any laws. Best I can suggest is maybe switch shifts for a while. Work days instead of nights. But Jenny couldn't switch shifts. The day waitress position was already filled, and Jenny needed the graveyard differential to make her rent. She was trapped by economics and a legal system that couldn't act until after someone got hurt. The third week, this week, things had gotten worse. The man in the red truck had started leaving notes under her windshield wipers. Nothing threatening, which made them somehow more terrifying than direct threats would have been. Saw you talking to the cook tonight. You looked happy. That blue sweater looks nice on you. Your apartment lights stayed on late last night. Hope you're getting enough sleep. Each note was written in careful block letters on plain white paper. No signature, no demands, just evidence that he was watching. Always watching. Jenny had stopped sleeping altogether. She'd installed extra locks on her apartment door, bought pepper spray, even considered buying a gun, though she'd never held one in her life. But what good were locks against someone who seemed to know her schedule better than she did? Tonight felt different, though. There was an electricity in the air, a sense of something building toward a breaking point. The red truck had arrived earlier than usual, 2:15 a.m., and it was parked closer to the building than before. Bold, like he was done hiding. Tank nursed his coffee and watched the parking lot for 20 minutes. The red truck didn't move. Neither did its driver, though Tank could make out a shadowy figure behind the wheel. This wasn't a tired trucker taking a break. This was surveillance. When Jenny brought his check, Tank made his decision. He couldn't just drive away and hope for the best. His sister, Sarah, had been stalked 15 years ago, back when Tank was overseas and couldn't help. The local police had been just as ineffective then, told her to be careful and call if anything happens. Something had happened, all right. Sarah had ended up in the hospital with 3 broken ribs and a fractured skull before her stalker was finally arrested. Tank had sworn that night, sitting beside Sarah's hospital bed, that he'd never again stand by while a predator hunted someone defenseless. The check was for $4.50. Tank left a $10 bill and picked up the pen Jenny had left on the table. In the margin of the receipt, he wrote, "I see the red truck. If you need help, write it on this receipt." He left the receipt on the table and walked to the restroom, giving Jenny a chance to read his message without being observed by whoever was in that truck. When he returned to his booth, the receipt was gone. Tank waited. 5 minutes stretched into 10. Had she thrown it away? Had she panicked? Maybe he'd misread the situation entirely. Maybe Jenny appeared beside his table, coffee pot in hand, even though his cup was still full. Her face was pale but determined. "Warm up that coffee for you?" "Sure," Tank said quietly. As she poured, she set something beside his cup. The receipt, folded small. Tank palmed it without looking down, finished his coffee, and stood to leave. "You have a good night, miss," he said. "Thank you," Jenny replied, and there was weight in those two words. Gratitude, hope, desperation, all rolled into one whispered phrase. Tank walked outside into the cold Montana night, got on his Harley, and rode 2 blocks before stopping under a streetlight to read what Jenny had written. In small, careful handwriting that showed just how scared she was, she'd written, "Red truck. 3 weeks. Follows me home. Notes on my car. Police won't help. I'm scared he's going to hurt me." At the bottom, in even smaller letters, his name is Dale Briggs. Works at the grain elevator. Lives on Elm Street. Please help me. Tank stared at the receipt for a long moment, feeling the familiar cold anger that had once made him good at his job in Afghanistan. Dale Briggs. Now, the predator had a name. Tank pulled out his phone and started making calls. The first call was to Tommy Wrench Martinez, the Iron Wolf Sergeant-at-Arms and Tank's closest friend in the club. Wrench answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the 3 a.m. hour. "Tank? What's wrong?" "Need the Brotherhood. Brother? How fast can you get to Millerville?" 20 minutes. "What's the situation?" Tank explained quickly. The scared waitress, the stalker, the police who couldn't or wouldn't help. When he finished, Wrench was quiet for a moment. "You know what happened last time we got involved in something like this?" Wrench said finally. Tank knew. 3 years ago, they'd intervened in a domestic violence situation in Billings. Husband was beating his wife. Kids were terrified. Law enforcement was moving too slowly. The Iron Wolves had made the problem go away, but the press attention had been brutal. Vigilante bikers take law into own hands. The heat from that incident had nearly destroyed the club. "This is different," Tank said. "This time we do it clean. No violence, no law-breaking. Just presence and pressure. And if it goes sideways, then we deal with it. But that girl doesn't deserve to suffer because we're worried about headlines." Another pause. Then, "I'll call the others." "How many do you need?" Tank thought about it. Too few bikes, and they wouldn't make an impression. Too many, and it would look like an invasion. 8 or 10. Enough to make a statement. "Give me 40 minutes. The second call was to Rebecca Chen, a civilian but one of the club's most valuable allies. Rebecca was a private investigator who'd helped the Iron Wolves with background checks and surveillance in the past. She owed Tank a favor from when he'd helped her nephew get out of a gang situation. "Rebecca, it's Tank Sullivan. I need you to run a name for me. Dale Briggs, works at a grain elevator in Millerville. Lives on Elm Street. Domestic situation? Stalking. Young woman, 19 years old. He's been hunting her for 3 weeks." Rebecca's voice hardened. She'd been stalked herself as a college student. "Give me 15 minutes. The third call was the hardest one. Sheriff Bill Morrison had been Tank's commanding officer in Afghanistan, and they'd maintained a friendship despite their very different career paths after discharge. Morrison was honest, competent, and genuinely cared about protecting people. He was also constrained by laws, procedures, and politics in ways that Tank wasn't. "Jesus. Tank, do you know what time it is?" "Bill, I need a favor." Unofficially, Morrison's voice sharpened. "What kind of favor?" "Information. Dale Briggs, Millerville resident. Has he been on your radar?" "Tank, you know I can't just—" "Bill." Tank's voice cut through the protest. "A 19-year-old girl is being stalked. She's called for help and been told there's nothing anyone can do until he hurts her. You know, as well as I do that by then, it might be too late." Silence. Then, "Dale Briggs. Yeah, I know the name. We've had complaints about him before, but nothing that stuck. Couple of women filed reports over the years, then dropped them. Word is he's connected. His uncle is on the county commission." "Connected how?" "Family's got money, influence. Nothing direct, Just the kind of pressure that makes problems disappear, if you catch my meaning. Tank caught his meaning perfectly. Small-town corruption at its finest. Not outright criminal, just enough influence to make inconvenient complaints go away. Bill, if something were to happen tonight, if Dale Briggs were to find himself under public scrutiny for his behavior, how would your department respond? Officially, we'd investigate any reported crimes. And unofficially, Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Unofficially, it might be helpful if someone documented his stalking behavior in a way that couldn't be ignored or swept aside. I understand. Tank, whatever you're planning, don't do anything stupid. And for God's sake, don't hurt anyone. Wouldn't dream of it, Sheriff. By 3:35 a.m., Rebecca had called back with Dale Briggs' full profile. 34 years old, employed at Millerville Grain and Feed for 6 years, lived alone in a house inherited from his grandmother on Elm Street. No arrests, but 3 restraining order requests filed against him over the past 5 years, all withdrawn before they could be processed. 2 DUIs, both reduced to reckless driving. A pattern of behavior and a pattern of escaping consequences. Tank, Rebecca said, there's something else. I pulled his social media profiles. This guy is obsessed with control. Posts about how women these days don't appreciate traditional men, how feminism is destroying society, how women need strong men to protect them. Classic predator mindset. Send me everything you've got, already in your email. Tank, be careful. Men like this, when they lose control of a situation, they can escalate quickly. By 3:45 a.m., 8 Harley-Davidsons were parked outside Murphy's truck stop. Tank had explained the situation to his brothers, shown them Jenny's note, laid out the plan. No violence, no threats, no illegal activity. Just a public display of interest in Dale Briggs' behavior. The red Chevy was still in the parking lot. Tank walked back into Murphy's truck stop at 3:47 a.m. Jenny looked up from wiping tables, saw him, and her face flooded with relief and terror in equal measure. Is that them? She whispered, glancing toward the window where 8 motorcycles were now clearly visible. That's them, Tank confirmed. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to make Dale Briggs very uncomfortable, but we're not going to touch him. We're going to document everything he does, follow him home, and make sure the whole town knows exactly what kind of man he is. But first, we need you safe. Jenny nodded. What do you want me to do? Nothing different. Serve coffee, do your job, act normal. But when your shift ends, don't go home alone. We'll escort you. Make sure he doesn't follow. And then what? What about tomorrow night and the night after that? Tank's expression was stone. By tomorrow night, Dale Briggs is going to understand that this town isn't big enough for his hobby. Tank walked back outside and nodded to his brothers. Wrench, a compact man with scarred hands and intelligent eyes, was already on his phone recording video. Red Chevy pickup, license plate Montana 4Y7B24, occupied by single male subject, parked in surveillance position outside Murphy's truck stop for approximately 1 hour. The other iron wolves spread out around the parking lot, not approaching the red truck, but making their presence unmistakably felt. 8 men in leather jackets, 8 Harley-Davidsons, 8 cell phones documenting everything. Inside the red truck, Dale Briggs was beginning to realize his comfortable anonymity was over. Tank approached the truck slowly, hands visible, phone recording. He stopped about 10 feet away and spoke in a calm, clear voice that would be audible on the video. Evening. Notice you've been sitting out here for a while. Just want to make sure everything's okay. Through the windshield, Tank could see Dale Briggs clearly for the first time. Mid-30s, soft around the middle, the kind of weak chin that suggested a weak character. His eyes were wide with surprise and growing panic. Dale rolled down his window. I'm not doing anything wrong, he said, voice higher than he probably intended. Nobody said you were. Tank replied reasonably. Just being neighborly. Cold night to be sitting in a parking lot. My truck was making a noise. I pulled over to listen to it, preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Tank glanced around the parking lot. Been making that noise for about an hour now. Dale's jaw worked soundlessly. Tank could see the wheels turning. How much did these bikers know? How much trouble was he in? Well, Tank continued, truck troubles can be expensive. Lucky for you. My friend Wrench, over there, is a certified mechanic. Maybe he could take a look, help you figure out what's wrong. Wrench walked over, tools already in hand, smile wide and completely without warmth. Be happy to help a fellow motorist. Pop the hood. The beautiful thing about the situation was that Dale couldn't refuse without admitting his truck wasn't actually broken. But if he agreed to the inspection, it would prove he'd been lying about the mechanical problems. Either way, his cover story was blown. Dale chose to run. Actually, I think it's running fine. Now, he said quickly. Thanks anyway. He started the engine and drove out of the parking lot at exactly the speed limit, careful not to do anything that could be construed as reckless or suspicious. But Tank noticed that he kept checking his mirrors, and his hands were gripping the steering wheel like it might escape. Wrench, Tank called out. Follow him home. Document where he lives. Get it on video. Rest of you, let's give Jenny an escort home when her shift ends. But the night was far from over. Dale Briggs was about to learn that running away from the problem only made it worse. At 4:15 a.m., Wrench called with an update. Followed him to 847 Elm Street. Two-story house, detached garage, chain-link fence around the backyard. He's inside now, but Tank? He's got binoculars. I can see him watching the street from his upstairs window. Good. Stay there. Keep him contained. Don't let him leave without documentation. At 4:30, Jenny's shift ended. She walked out of Murphy's with her keys in one hand and pepper spray in the other, a routine she developed over the past 3 weeks. But instead of walking alone to her beat-up Honda Civic, she found herself escorted by 8 men who moved like a honor guard. Tank held up a hand as they reached her car. Check it first, he told Wrench. Wrench examined Jenny's Honda methodically, looking for tracking devices, signs of tampering, anything that shouldn't be there. He found something immediately. Tank, Wrench called softly. Come look at this. Under the driver's side windshield wiper was a folded piece of paper. Jenny's face went white. Another note, she whispered. Tank carefully removed the paper, handling it by the edges, and unfolded it. In the same block letters as the previous notes, it read, Who are your new friends? I don't like sharing. The escalation was unmistakable. Dale Briggs wasn't just angry about the interference, he was claiming ownership of Jenny. In his twisted mind, she belonged to him, and the bikers were competition. Tank showed the note to the others, then to Jenny. Her hands were shaking. He was here, she said. While I was working, he got out of his truck and came over to my car. What if? What if next time he doesn't just leave a note? There isn't going to be a next time, Tank said firmly. Wrench, call Rebecca. Tell her we need this note analyzed for fingerprints and handwriting comparison. Also tell her we need to know everything about Dale Briggs' history, employment records, previous addresses, any other women who might have filed complaints. Tank turned to the other bikers. Rodriguez, Slim, I want you two to follow Jenny home and make sure she gets inside safely. Park outside her building until morning. Miller and Jackson, go relieve Wrench at Briggs' house. Keep him under surveillance. He doesn't move without us knowing about it. What about you? Jenny asked. Tank smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. I'm going to have a conversation with Thinkin. Some people who should have protected you 3 weeks ago. At 5:30 a.m., Tank walked into the Millerville Sheriff's Department with 8 gigabytes of video evidence and a folder full of documentation. Deputy Collins was working the night desk, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Can I help you? Collins asked, eyeing Tank's leather jacket and club patches with obvious discomfort. I'm here to file a report, Tank said calmly. Stalking, harassment, and criminal menacing. Collins sighed. Sir, if this is about some bar fight or club business. Tank set his phone on the desk and played the video of Dale Briggs sitting in the truck stop parking lot. This is Dale Briggs engaging in surveillance of a 19-year-old waitress named Jenny McKenzie. He's been doing this every night for 3 weeks. Here's video of him placing threatening notes on her vehicle. Here are the notes themselves, documenting his escalating behavior. Collins watched the video with growing unease. Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification. Tank handed over his driver's license. Marcus Sullivan. I'm a veteran, a business owner, and a concerned citizen reporting a crime. Mr. Sullivan, what exactly is your relationship to Miss McKenzie? I'm someone who gives a damn about protecting innocent people, which is apparently more than can be said for this department. Collins bristled. Now see here, Deputy Collins. Tank interrupted. I have video evidence of stalking behavior. I have written threats. I have documentation of a pattern of harassment that your department has ignored for 3 weeks. Are you going to take this report, or do I need to drive to the state police? Before Collins could answer, Sheriff Morrison walked through the front door. He looked tired, like he'd been awake all night, and his expression was grim. Deputy Collins, I'll handle this. Mr. Sullivan, my office. Tank followed Morrison into a cramped office decorated with military memorabilia and family photos. Morrison closed the door and sat heavily behind his desk. Show me what you've got, Morrison said. Tank laid out everything, the videos, the notes, Rebecca's background research on Dale Briggs, witness statements from the other Iron Wolves. When he finished, Morrison leaned back in his chair. This is thorough, Morrison admitted. Professional quality investigation. More thorough than anything your department did when Jenny called for help. Morrison winced. Tank, you know how these things work? Until someone crosses a clear legal line, Bill. Tank's voice was quiet but dangerous. That girl called you twice, asking for help. She was told there was nothing you could do. Meanwhile, Dale Briggs has been playing cat and mouse with her for 3 weeks, escalating his behavior, leaving threatening notes, following her home. How exactly is that not crossing a legal line? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. Politics, Tank. Dale Briggs' uncle is Commissioner Briggs. Families got influence. When complaints came in about Dale, the word came down from above to handle them quietly. Make them go away. So, you're telling me this department protects predators as long as they have the right last name? I'm telling you that small-town politics are complicated. Tank stood up. No, Bill, they're not complicated at all. You either protect people, or you protect predators. There's no middle ground. Tank gathered up his evidence. I'm filing this report with the state police. I'm also sending copies to every news outlet in Montana. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this state is going to know that the Millerville Sheriff's Department ignored a stalking victim because her stalker had political connections. Tank, wait. I'm done waiting. That girl has been waiting for 3 weeks for someone to help her. The waiting stops now. Tank walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing, Bill. We're going to be watching Dale Briggs 24 hours a day from now on. Every move he makes, every place he goes, every breath he takes. And if he so much as looks at Jenny McKenzie wrong, if he drives down her street or shows up at her work, the video of what happens next is going to be all over the internet before your department can cover it up. That sounds like vigilante justice. Tank smiled coldly. No, Bill. Vigilante justice would be taking Dale Briggs out to the woods and making sure he never bothered anyone again. What we're doing is called citizen oversight. We're going to document everything he does and make sure the whole world can see it. Legal, public, and absolutely unstoppable. Tank left the sheriff's office and walked into the dawn light. His phone was already ringing. Rebecca, with more information. Wrench with updates on Dale's movements. Other Iron Wolves checking in. The Brotherhood was mobilizing in ways they hadn't in years. But the most important call came at 7:30 a.m. Jenny McKenzie, voice shaky but determined. Tank, I want to press charges. Against Dale. Against anyone who protected him. I want to tell my story to the newspapers. I'm done being scared. Tank smiled. Sometimes the best thing you could do for someone wasn't to solve their problems for them. It was to stand beside them while they found the strength to solve their own problems. We'll be right there, Tank said. And Jenny? You're not alone anymore. The story broke at 11 a.m. on a Thursday morning, when Rebecca Chin's contact at the Helena Independent Record published an article titled Stalking Victim Ignored by Local Police as Family Connections Shield Predator. By noon, it had been picked up by the Associated Press. By 2 p.m., news vans were driving into Millerville. Dale Briggs, meanwhile, had not left his house since the previous night. The Iron Wolves maintained surveillance in shifts, documenting his every movement. What they saw was a man falling apart. Through the windows of his house, they could see him pacing, talking on the phone, drinking heavily even though it wasn't yet noon. At 1:30 p.m., he tried to leave through his back door, apparently hoping to avoid the bikers watching his front yard. He found Wrench waiting in the alley. "Afternoon, Dale," Wrench said pleasantly, cell phone recording. "Going somewhere?" Dale retreated back into his house. At 3 p.m., Commissioner Briggs arrived at his nephew's house in an expensive sedan, accompanied by a man in a suit who looked like a lawyer. They stayed for 40 minutes. When they left, the lawyer looked grim, and Commissioner Briggs looked like he'd aged 10 years. At 4 p.m., Dale Briggs walked out of his house carrying a suitcase. Tank, who had taken over surveillance duty, started his motorcycle. "Dale's moving," he reported over the radio. "Single suitcase. Looks like he's running." Dale threw the suitcase into his red truck and drove straight to the bank. Security cameras recorded him withdrawing the full maximum daily amount from his checking account. From there, he drove to the Millerville Police Department. Tank followed at a distance, documenting everything. When Dale emerged from the police station 30 minutes later, he was no longer carrying the suitcase. His face was red, and his hands were shaking. Rebecca's contact in the sheriff's department later confirmed what everyone suspected. Dale Briggs had confessed to stalking Jenny McKenzie. Not because he'd found religion or grown a conscience, but because his uncle's lawyer had explained exactly how much legal trouble he was in now that his behavior was documented and public. The confession included details about other women he'd stalked over the years, incidents that had been covered up or dismissed. It was a complete capitulation, an attempt to get ahead of the scandal before it destroyed his entire family's political influence. But Dale Briggs wasn't done making bad decisions. At 6 p.m., instead of driving out of town like any sane person would have done, Dale drove to Murphy's truck stop. Jenny wasn't working. She'd taken a few days off while the media attention died down, but Dale didn't know that. He parked in his usual surveillance spot and waited. Tank watched from across the parking lot and felt his blood turn to ice. This was the moment every domestic violence expert warned about. When a controlling man realized he'd lost control completely, he often escalated to violence. Tank called the sheriff's department. "This is Marcus Sullivan. Dale Briggs is at Murphy's truck stop, apparently looking for Jenny McKenzie. Given his escalating behavior and current mental state, I believe he represents an imminent threat." "Sir, has he made any threatening statements?" "No. But has he displayed any weapons?" "Not that I can see. But then there's nothing we can do unless he commits an actual crime." Tank hung up in disgust and called his brothers. Within 10 minutes, 6 Iron Wolves had surrounded the truck stop. This time, they weren't taking any chances. Tank approached Dale's truck directly, camera recording. "Dale, I think you're confused. Jenny isn't here." Dale rolled down his window. His eyes were bloodshot, and Tank could smell alcohol on his breath. "She has to be here," Dale said. "She always works Thursday nights." "She's safe," Tank said. "She's somewhere you'll never find her. And if you even think about looking for her, you'll have to deal with us." Dale's face twisted with rage. "You can't stop me. I know where she lives. I know where she works. I know everywhere she goes." "Not anymore, you don't." Dale reached under his seat, and Tank's hand moved instinctively to his waist. For a terrifying moment, Tank thought Dale was going for a gun. Instead, he pulled out a manila folder stuffed with papers and photographs. "Look at this," Dale said, his voice cracking. "Look what I did for her. I documented everything about her life. Her schedule, her habits, her friends. I kept her safe. I watched over her." Tank looked at the folder and felt sick. Dozens of photographs taken from a distance. Jenny at work, Jenny at home, Jenny shopping, Jenny sleeping in her bedroom with the curtains not quite closed. Months of surveillance, documented obsession, a complete violation of her privacy and autonomy. "Dale," Tank said quietly, "this isn't love. This isn't protection. This is hunting." "You don't understand," Dale said, tears running down his face now. "Women like her, They don't know how dangerous the world is. They need someone strong to watch over them. They need someone who cares enough to pay attention. They need someone who respects them enough to leave them alone. Dale shoved the folder back under his seat. She'll come back to me. When she realizes that those other men don't really care about her, she'll come back. Tank had heard enough. He stepped back from the truck and spoke clearly for the camera. Dale Briggs, you are in violation of a restraining order. You are currently intoxicated and operating a motor vehicle. You have admitted to stalking behavior, and you are in possession of what appears to be evidence of criminal surveillance. I am making a citizen's arrest pending the arrival of law enforcement. Dale panicked. He threw his truck into gear and floored the accelerator, trying to escape the parking lot. But the Iron Wolves had positioned their motorcycles to block all exits. Dale's truck smashed into Wrench's Harley, sending both vehicles spinning. The crash wasn't serious. Nobody was hurt, but it was the final straw. Dale Briggs sat in his damaged truck, surrounded by bikers and security cameras, while sirens wailed in the distance. When the police arrived, they found a complete breakdown. Dale was crying, mumbling about how he'd only wanted to protect Jenny, how nobody understood that he was the good guy in this story. The folder under his seat contained enough evidence to support charges of stalking, harassment, criminal surveillance, and invasion of privacy. The photographs alone were enough to put him away for years. As Dale was led away in handcuffs, Tank felt a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. They'd stopped a predator, but it had taken a small army of bikers and a media circus to do what the police should have handled with one phone call 3 weeks ago. 3 months later, Jenny McKenzie was getting ready for her first day of college classes. She'd used the Victim Compensation Fund and a scholarship for stalking survivors to enroll at Montana State University, 400 miles away from Millerville and the nightmare that had almost destroyed her life. Dale Briggs had pled guilty to multiple stalking charges and was serving 18 months in state prison. Commissioner Briggs had resigned in disgrace, and Deputy Collins was facing an internal affairs investigation for his failure to properly investigate Jenny's complaints. Most importantly, the Montana legislature had passed Jenny's law, legislation requiring law enforcement agencies to take stalking complaints seriously and creating accountability measures for officers who failed to protect victims. Tank stood in the parking lot of Murphy's truck stop, now under new management and renamed Phoenix Diner. The red neon sign still flickered, but somehow it seemed less ominous now. Jenny walked out of the diner. She was working one last shift before heading to college and approached Tank with a shy smile. I never properly thanked you, she said. Yes, you did. You thanked me by surviving, by fighting back, by refusing to let him win. Jenny nodded, then surprised Tank by hugging him. You saved my life. No, Tank said quietly. You saved your own life. You wrote that note. You asked for help. You had the courage to testify against him. We just made sure you didn't have to do it alone. As Jenny drove away toward her new life, Tank thought about his sister Sarah, about all the women who hadn't been as lucky as Jenny, about all the predators who were still out there hunting. The Iron Wolves couldn't save everyone, but they could save some people. And sometimes, that was enough. Tank started his Harley and rode into the Montana sunset, where another call was waiting, another victim who needed someone to stand between them and the darkness. Because that's what Brotherhood meant. Not the leather jackets, or the motorcycles, or the patches. It meant showing up when others wouldn't. It meant standing up when others sat down. It meant being the wall between the innocent and the wolves. And in a world that often seemed indifferent to suffering, that Brotherhood was sometimes the only thing standing between justice and chaos. The Iron Wolves rode on. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.